Hello, beautiful soul, and welcome back to A Blessing in Divorce. Today, I want to speak to a part of you that is so deeply human. It's the part of you that just wants to be seen and heard and understood. We all want that. The part of us that longs for someone to look at your pain and say, yes, I see what you've been through or what you're going through. You're not crazy and you are worthy. You are enough. That longing has a name and it's called validation. And I think we all know what that means. There's a lot of conversation in social media and in general in the coaching space, therapy space about a need for validation. We even say it about ourselves. I need validation for what I've gone through. I need this person to validate that they've caused me pain, for example. That longing has a name and it's validation. And it's so powerful. It can be really powerful in healing. When we receive validation, it helps us heal. However, it can also be it can be a trap. It keeps us stuck. It can keep us bitter and disconnected from our own truth. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Let's take a tender but honest look at our need for validation, why we crave it, how it connects us with our ego and our past or earlier wounds, and how, if we're not conscious, it can stand in the way of our healing. So let's get into this. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of A Blessing in Divorce. I am so grateful to be allowed into your headset and day today. My name is Elisabeth, and I'm the host of this podcast and the owner and founder of The Separation Club, which is the club you never wanted to be part of, but the best club to be in if you're going through separation and divorce. Here we talk about how to heal, move forward, and find love if you're so inclined. Also, motherhood through divorce, finding yourself, and creating the life you deserve. Our tools are community, sisterhood, honesty, vulnerability, spirituality, and coaching. And that's when we aren't talking to our experts. I'm also a divorced mother of 4 adult sons, remarried, and a stepmom to 3. So we will be talking about everything that goes with all of that here. If you are recently separated, thinking of separating, divorcing, or even beyond your divorce, but still feeling it, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome back. Now, we're talking about validation today, and I want to be very clear right up front. Validation is not a flaw. It is a basic human need. From the moment we are born, we look to others to reflect who we are, to teach us how they see us in a way. It teaches us about our identity. As babies, we need caregivers to mirror our emotions and affirm our existence. When they smile back and comfort us, it says, you're safe and we love you. And that wasn't just something that was nice. It's actually, our survival depends on it. But for many of us, that safety wasn't consistent. We were told to stop crying, for example, to be quieter, easier, more agreeable, not so difficult. All the labels started to come on us. We may have been praised only when we performed or when we were doing something that wasn't actually true to ourselves, when we were being something other than who you really wanted to be. So what happens during that time, these foundational years with our initial caregivers, our parents or whatever? And this isn't going to be some big bashing on parents. By the way, I am a parent and I know I did some of these things. So let's just not go there, okay? But let's understand what happens. We end up growing into women or people who chase validation like it's oxygen. We overgive, we overachieve, or we might shrink ourselves and make ourselves small. We might perform or put on the persona so that we can receive the validation in the same way that we learned to do when we were little. To either be quiet and play small and then we were loved, or at least not loved, or whatever it may have been. Like, really take a look at the pattern in your house. And understand how that pattern now shows up as an adult. We become the good girl or the perfect wife or the spiritual one until one day, after something that is as sort of catastrophic as divorce tends to be, we wake up and we realize, we've been living someone else's story. We've been living a script that was put in place for us, but really isn't who we are. So validation becomes the carrot that we're never really quite able to touch. We just can't ever get that true validation where we truly feel the acceptance and the love, because we're constantly doing something that doesn't feel true to ourselves to get it. You get what I'm saying? I think you do. It's the applause that we crave and the ex who never apologizes, right? Everybody knows about that one. It's when we make it about the social media likes and we say that that's, we all know we're not really ourselves on social media. So when we seek likes from there, or we place our own value in how many likes or how much attention we get on social media, it's still not validating your worthiness, because it's not really about you. It's about the beautiful picture you put out or the vacation you show pictures of or whatever it is. So it comes from that desire to be loved and worthy and chosen, but we need to stop and look at who do we have to be and what do we have to let go of within ourselves in order to get that, right? And so this is where we get stuck in a bit of an ego and validation loop, and it's not a great loop. So let's talk about the ego for a moment. And there are other episodes about the ego from before. I'm sure if you do a search, you can find them. But let's talk about this for a second in a very non-judgmental and loving way. So your ego is part of you that wants to protect you from pain. It's the part of you that gives you sort of an identity. It kind of tells you who to be so that you are safe, right? It whispers things to you like, if they agree with me, then I must be right. Or if they tell me I'm strong, then I am. Or if they admit that they hurt me, then I can finally let go. Like, it creates all these rules in your head based on what other people think of you. But here's the truth, my friend. When we live from the ego, we're always waiting for someone else to give us permission to heal, permission to be happy, permission to feel worthy, permission to move forward. We're constantly seeking approval or validation from outside of us, and we're stuck until we can give it to ourselves. That's the bottom line. That's the validation loop. So you might find yourself, for example, sharing on social media about your healing. You share beautiful quotes. You talk about the work you're doing. But then when no one responds, or maybe don't respond anymore, you see it kind of feels crushed because you're not getting what you'd hoped to get, which was that validation of, oh my God, my friend, you really hit home with that, or like that really resonated with me, or oh my God, you're so brave and I can't believe you're doing this work and you're so great. And so based on we're not getting responses from others, we see it as a lack of validation, a lack of value. We have lack of value and we're not doing the right thing. Or it might delay your ability to move forward from the divorce and healing from it, because in fact, I hear it all the time, to be honest with you, in the Facebook group. I need closure, or I need that, I need my ex to validate the pain they've caused me and to admit it or to apologize for it, and so that I can have closure. It's all about validation. So I can't heal until that happens. What a tremendous amount of power to give away to a person who no longer has your best interests at heart, who you have decided or they have decided to not be each other's person anymore. Either way, whoever decided to give that power of your healing and your inner sort of self-love and worthiness to this person, well, that doesn't make sense. So you might even notice yourself holding on to this resentment, because if you let go of the resentment or the anger towards them for what they've done, then it's like they got away with it. Not only have they not apologized, but if you stop being angry and resentful and talking about it and crying about it, well, then it's like kind of like it didn't happen and they got away with it, right? And that is a struggle for so many. It feels like your pain didn't matter. But this is where the work is. This is what the ego fears, by the way, that without this validation, your suffering isn't real. And currently, if you're in this cycle and you're recognizing yourself in the things that I'm saying, then your ego is deeply invested and committed to a pain story. And I definitely look for an episode about the pain story. In fact, I think I did a whole series on it. Go and check it out, because there's so much to be learned by understanding your pain story. But I'm just going to go by it fairly quickly today. But when the ego is invested in your pain story, it's constantly going to be seeking outside validation for this pain, constant reassurance that yes, you deserve to be in pain. Yes, your suffering is real, because otherwise you're invalidated. Maybe the suffering isn't real. Maybe you aren't in pain. And now the ego has no role, because there is no pain story to identify with. You're moving on to something else that feels way better. And so it keeps you in the pain story. It keeps rotating that pain and that suffering through you with resentment, angry thoughts, and all of that. And here's the thing. You don't need anyone to co-sign, if you will, your healing, your need to heal, your desire to heal. You don't need anyone to agree with you or validate that need for it to be valid. Okay? So I want to get into this a little bit more and talk about why and how validation blocks your healing. So healing is not a performance. It does not require an audience or a stamp of approval. And this is where the ego validation thing, these are two separate things. What your ego wants and the validation that you need to heal are two separate things. And the way that you go about validating your pain and healing from it, and the way the ego goes about it, is completely different. And one works and one doesn't. And I'm sure you can imagine which is which. So as I said, when you are healing, you don't need an audience for your healing to happen or for the suffering to have happened. You don't need an audience to give you a stamp of approval that yes, you're in pain and that yes, the healing you're doing is real. You know your truth. You know the story. You know what's going on inside. So the only thing that is required for you to move forward, to heal, to let go of resentment and anger is something that we're actually really uncomfortable with. And that's this inner honesty, this deep truth that we know is in us, and allowing us to live by that and to heal by that. And that is a journey that I went on when I went through my divorce. And while it's one of the hardest things that I've ever done, and I keep doing it, by the way, I keep running through things when I go through challenges in life, and trust me, there have been many things in life that have caused me as much challenge or pain or suffering or whatever you want to call it as my divorce. But because of the tools I learned through this work when I went through my divorce, I have the tools now, but it's still hard. That honesty is hard. But we cannot heal if we are still, like being something for someone else, shape-shifting, for someone else's approval. We cannot reclaim ourselves and our truth while we're trying to be seen as the better X or the right one or the higher, being or the better person. Winning this popularity contest between you and your ex is not going to give you the healing that you're seeking. We cannot rise, we cannot heal into this true version of yourself with real deep honesty while we're still hoping for someone else to say to us, you were right, I was wrong. The truth is, sometimes the apology never comes. And in fact, in these situations, it very often doesn't. Sometimes they never acknowledge the harm that they've caused. And sometimes the validation that we ache for, it just never, ever arrives. Not from our family, not from our ex, not even from our friends sometimes. And yet, you can still say, I don't need that. I don't need their stamp of approval. I can still choose peace. I can still choose joy. and I can still choose myself. Yeah, you can still do that. So, where do we begin and how do we do it? Well, I recommend you do what I did, and you start with curiosity and being very kind, compassionate, and loving towards yourself. Start by asking why. Why did I feel the way I did? Why did I respond or react the way I did? As I'm still living my pain story, the ego story I just talked about, who am I still trying to impress or win over, right? You could ask, what am I still hoping that they'll say? Or what part of you feels unworthy without this external approval or even proof that, yes, you went through this. So this is when we come home to ourselves. We let go of the need to win validation, to be right. We just let go of it. It's not that we then become wrong. Don't go there. That's the ego talking. It's about not needing someone else to tell you that you're right to be right. It's not needing someone else to say that person's awful and treated you badly for that to be true. You know. So look into the mirror, my friend. Look into the mirror. And if you're not at home in front of a mirror, do it when you get home and hold eye contact. Look yourself in the eye. Place your hand on your heart and say to yourself, I see you. I believe you. You matter. You are healing. Look yourself right in the eye, just like I just looked at you when I said that. You can do that. That will feel like medicine, like a balm for your heart and your soul. That feels nourishing to say to yourself. Let's say it one more time. Eye contact. I see you. I believe you. You matter. You are healing. Pretty awesome, right? So, how do you feel even just right now? Right? Just take a moment to recognize how you feel right now, just having said that. We validate ourselves when we stop waiting for it from other people. Even just the act of saying, I don't need someone else's validation. I don't need to wait for this closure anymore. I can validate myself. That is validating in itself. When we speak our truth to ourselves, even without anyone, or because no one is listening, because we're doing it with ourselves, that's validating. When we decide to take a break, to stay at home, to rest, to take a day, take a moment, to walk out of the room, not because someone gave us permission, not because someone declared that what's happening here is bad, but because we believe, we know how we're feeling and we know what we need. That's validating. It's when we choose to cry and rage and let go of things without having to explain it. We don't owe anyone an explanation. And even better sometimes is doing it on your own. A lot of the work that we do in our retreats is release work, or it's not a lot of it, but it's one of the very important components that we do. And I really, we either have a burn ritual at the retreat, or I give them as a ritual that they can do at home. Usually we do actually a bit of both, because having a specific release or letting go ritual, like actually putting that kind of focus and energy into the decision to let go of something, is so powerful and so effective. And if we're doing that in the witnessed by others, not asking for their validation, by the way, not seeking any kind of approval or anything like that, just simply I'm releasing this in the presence of my sisters who are just holding space for me to do that. That is huge. That is validating because we're doing it for us without seeking anything from the people around us. We validate ourselves when we write in our journals and we don't post about it online. And this is something really important and powerful to remember as well, because if we're journaling thinking that we're going to be sharing it with someone, we're going to edit. We're going to edit and think about how we're writing things and how we're portraying ourselves. That's our ego talking again. That's us looking for approval again, or some kind of an affirmation or validation, right? But if we are writing only for our own benefit, only for us to dig deep and learn, for us to allow all feelings to come to the surface, everything that we want to say comes out, good or bad, things where we're being kind and flattering to ourselves, and other areas where we're like a little bit embarrassed, but we can say it because it's our journal where no one is going to read it. This is why it is so essential to understand how validation, or this desire to be validated by other people, blocks our healing. I talked about the importance of self-honesty. It's really hard to be truly honest with ourselves if we're going to turn on and tell our friends what we're discovering about ourselves. Maybe you discover that you have a bit of a jealous streak, or you have a tendency to, I don't know, repeat yourself, or you have an insecurity thing going on, or lack of confidence, or whatever. We all have these things, by the way. We all have these things, but we don't want others to see it. So when part of our healing journey is all about going to our friends, for example, or our family members, or sharing online, well, there's an element of honesty that won't be there. You won't go quite as deep, and you won't learn all those things about yourself that you can write about in your journal, for example. So these are the ways that seeking this outward validation can block our healing, because we're not as honest with ourselves. And also because when we're seeking external validation, and so then our focus is external. It is all about how we're being received and what people might say if we tell them this or tell them that. We're also inadvertently avoiding the inner work. And this is often why people seek external validation, because they're afraid to go within. Because maybe you will discover a couple of things that you're like, don't love that about myself. That's not a great trait that I have, or not loving how I tend to respond to this particular kind of situation. I'd like to change that. Well, that kind of self-honesty, it's hard, okay? It just is. And so that work needs to be done, by the way. We're not perfect, and that's okay. But make sure that when you're really trying to heal and trying to find that part of yourself that's true and lovable and wonderful, that it doesn't have to be perfect and it doesn't have to be all shiny, but it has to be true. You cannot love yourself for something that you are not. And loving yourself means loving all of you, the good and the bad and the ugly, okay? It means being honest. And so we have to turn the focus away from needing validation from others and turn it inward so that we can find the healing in the stillness, in the shadow work, in our sacred pause, and not in the more sort of performative kind of healing that we tend to see everybody blurt out about on social media. I mean, how many posts do you see that start with, I'm on this healing journey and blah, 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 blah. And it's fine if you feel called to share some of these things, or you want to help others by sharing your story. I do it all the time. It's okay. But if part of sharing is the need for validation, likes, follows, comments, and if you don't get that, it will have a negative impact on you, then it's problematic. So we want to make sure as well that when we're only focused on what's external, that we're not bypassing our emotions, and that we're not bypassing the part of us that still needs some inner work. So as we're shifting from external validation inward, we talked a lot about this now, we're going to do radical self-honesty. I think I've covered that. And we're going to do this inner witnessing, which I also discussed earlier, with the journaling and also the mirror practice, right? Standing and talking to yourself. And then there's also other practices that you can do, like you can put your hands on your heart and feel the love for yourself, sending love to yourself, for example. You can also do butterfly hugs, all of these, by the way, or several of these are available to you in the app, the Rising Sisterhood app. Some of them are in the panic buttons, but most of them, or all of them rather, are available in the panic button, the reset room, where there's 10 panic buttons. But within each one of the panic buttons, there's a somatic practice of some kind that will help settle your nervous system, help you with this validation, help you with the breath work needed to go deep inside. So practices like I just mentioned, like the butterfly hug, or a breath practice called Nadi Shodhana, which helps us balance the left and the right side of our brains and self-soothe. All of these things really, really help us heal, because it validates us. It's you telling you that you're worthy of this time and this practice and this learning to do these things. And each one of these practices teaches your body in the moment, I'm safe, I'm heard, I'm seen, I belong, I'm enough. And that's a beautiful message to send to your body as it's trying to heal from something that's been so difficult. And as you do this work, that really the last step of self-validation is reclaiming your sovereignty. It's returning to this inner authority, this I know what I need, I can give myself what I need, I'm worthy of this time, I'm not going to let others take this away from me, I'm not going to give away my power to other people so that my healing depends on them, my joy, my future, my self-love, all these things. None of these things depend on other people, because it's all within me. Every single one of you, no matter what you have gone through, hold the capacity and the ability to do the work that I've just talked about. Every single one of you can choose to self-validate, can choose to love yourself, can choose to do these practices, and take the time to keep doing it until you feel the healing of it, the growth in it, the working, right? And you'll find yourself going back to these practices over and over again, if not just continuing to do them, because they just simply make you feel so good. And you, my dear, beautiful soul, you're so worth it. You're so deserving of feeling good. Every single one of you. You all are. And I really hope and pray that you choose to do this work for yourself. And if you need any help, you know where to find me. So I am going to wrap up here and head over to the Rising Sisterhood app and do one of the self-love meditations that you'll find as soon as you open the app in the mindfulness corner, or choose to do a breath practice, or head into the reset room and do some work in there and find the practices. I've organized it by various sort of panic moments, so there's panic buttons, but then I've also, in the resources inside the reset room, I have put several of the practices just kind of stand alone, so that you can go to them whenever you want without having to necessarily listen to the whole panic button, because maybe you don't need a panic button, but you'd really like to do the breath practice. All of that is available to you in there. Well, my friend, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Before I go, I beg of you, please subscribe, and please leave a review. I know many of you tell me in my Facebook group, and you send me emails and tell me how much you love this podcast, and I'm so grateful for that. But in order for this to reach other people who also need it, I need a little love from you. I need a couple of new comments. I need some 5-star ratings. So please share whatever you want to share with me in some comments, some reviews. I would really appreciate it. And so would the others who find the podcast because of that. So pay it forward, ladies. And until next time, I love you big time. Have a beautiful day.